Hey guys, thanks for joining me. In today's video, we're going to take a look at a new product from a company called Elecaenta. Now that's a brand that I have tested a couple of their solar panels in the past. Back in the early days, I had bought a couple of solar panels from this company off of Amazon. They were very good, solid panels, very economical for the bang for the buck. So really good value products. And this company reached out to me and actually said, would you like to check out our new DC fridge? So this is their UD45 model number. It's a DC fridge dual zone, so it's got freezer and fridge capability. And despite the 45 model name, it's actually a 43 quart unit and just a little over 40 liters, I believe. But it's got a battery compartment for an optional battery so that you can actually run this thing off of battery power. Self-contained without having to plug it in. It does come with an AC adapter for AC wall power. You can easily power this off of AC or DC because it comes with a DC cable as well. So you can power it directly off a 12-volt battery if you want, or if you have a 24-volt system, it does support a 24-volt system as well. But it's also got a solar connection on the side that's up to 100 watts of solar. You cannot run it directly off solar. You have to have the battery. So the solar port is really for recharging that battery. Now in terms of weight and dimensions, this thing weighs in at a very manageable 39.6 pounds empty. Make sure you realize that that's empty. It's going to weigh a lot more than that if you pack it full of soft drinks. But yeah, so just under 40 pounds empty, very manageable. Now in terms of dimensions, it is 27.2 inches wide. It's about 18.9 inches tall and about 16 inches deep. So those are the dimensions you've got to work with. Now it does have little wheels in the back here, and it's got a little pop-up handle that you can use to sort of cart this around. So when you do have it stocked full, you don't actually have to manhandle it if you're just trying to move it from point A to point B. All right, I think that about covers the basic specs. Let's go ahead and dive into the performance and maybe into the feature set, just a little bit more detail, and see how this thing works out. All right, let's take a look at how these settings work. So right now I do have an auxiliary battery plugged into the side. And so that's why we're seeing that icon there, because I am powering this not off of the battery, but through the AC adapter. And since I have inserted the battery is now in a charging state. So that's why we get that little animation there. So you have two temperature displays here, 35 degrees and 12 degrees. That is showing me not the set points, but the current temperature. So to change the temperature, it's pretty straightforward. So if I want to change the temperature over the one on the left, which I'm using as a fridge, maybe I want that to be just a little bit colder, I just really touch, say, the plus button, and that'll start flashing, and then I can take that down to, say, 33 degrees. And if I hit the gear icon, while that is flashing, it'll switch to the other side, and now I can adjust that temperature. But since I didn't do it quick enough, I have to do that over again. And I can take this all the way down to, I think, -4. Yeah, so -4 is the coldest that it'll go. And that's how you set the temperature. And if you don't touch anything after about 5 seconds, as you can see, it goes back to solid. Now the other thing you can do is hit the gear icon, and you see eco starts flashing. So that's eco mode is to use the least amount of power. So if we want to change that, we can change that to max by pressing it twice. It goes to max, and now if I just don't touch anything, that'll go solid. And now the compressor will kick on a little more often, allow less tolerance between high and low temperatures to try and achieve the set point. So the compressor will run a little bit more often under max. Now if you look real closely right there, see a little H right between the 33 there. That is referencing the particular setting we are currently on for the battery protection mode. And this is something that you definitely want to have as a feature in your DC fridge, because if you're running this off your car battery, you want this thing to be able to monitor the car battery's voltage and to shut itself off so it doesn't fully deplete your car battery. So there's a low, medium, and high mode here, and it defaults to high, hence the H, and that will cut off when the car battery, in fact I'll put a little chart up here so you can see, that will cut off the refrigerator when the car battery's voltage is 11.1 volts or lower. And then it'll cut back in, it'll turn itself back on if the car voltage rises above 12.4 volts. So that keeps you from being stranded. So defaults to H, which is probably where you generally want to leave it. But if you want to maximize runtime out of a external battery that you're running it from, or the internal battery, what you do is press and hold this for about 3 seconds. Now it's flashing, and now you can move it between low, medium, and high. So since I'm running on the internal battery, I can run it all the way down to low, which means it won't cut off until that internal battery runs down to 8.5 volts. So I can maximize the runtime I get out of that optional battery that you can snap into the side. So pretty cool. All right, taking a little bit of a closer look here. On the inside of both the refrigerator and the freezer side, there is an LED light that comes on when you open the lids. And then there's also pull-out baskets. So this is kind of nice. You can go take the baskets inside, stock them with whatever you want so you know what's going to fit. And you bring them out and just drop them into place. So that's on both the freezer and the refrigerator side. And then the doors are also reversible. And maybe it's just for whatever reason, the logistics of if you're using this in a car or an SUV, makes more sense to open it from the other side. All you got to do is open it, pop it out. There's a little nub on one side. You just set that in place and you slide the other end in. And now it's latched on the other side. And of course, you can have them latched oppositely if you want. I don't know how much sense that would make for most people, but you could do that. So same over here, flip it around. All right, now I've got it reversed. But yeah, lots of flexibility there to be able to move that around, which I think is pretty important because not everybody's space logistics are the same. All right, let's see what these interior dimensions are. As you can see, the freezer side is a lot more shallow. In fact, the height on the freezer side is about 6.5 inches. And on the width, it's 7 3/4 inches. And in this direction, it is almost exactly 12 inches. Now compare that to the refrigerator side. And by the way, I'm saying freezer and refrigerator because usually the freezer side would be the smaller of the two. But of course, you can use this, configure both zones for the same temperature. You could use the whole thing as a freezer if you wanted to, or you could use the whole thing as a refrigerator. Just set the zones to the same temperature and you're off to the races. But on the larger side, let's say, that is about 14 1/4 to 14 1/2. So it's definitely tall enough for a bottle of wine. If you were looking for that, easily would fit at least a gallon jug and then some. Now in terms of the distance here, this is again almost exactly 12 inches. And then the distance wide is almost exactly 11 inches. So those are the dimensions on the inside of the unit. So plenty of space to put probably a couple gallons in here of liquid or milk, water, whatever you were going to put in here. I think this would fit a 2-liter bottle as well. It's definitely got the depth for that. It's also got a drain plug here at the bottom too, by the way. So you could put ice in this and then drain it if you wanted to supplement for some reason. But yeah, so I guess we could figure out how many cans it will fit. So we'll do this with the little baskets out. So I got 32 in there. I suspect I could get at least 8 more. So that's about 40 12-ounce cans that you could put in on this side. Now if you were using it on the other side, 12. So I can get 12 cans on the freezer side or the smaller compartment. So 40 cans, 12 cans. Do with that information whatever you will. As you can see, this is measuring this in kilowatt hours. So 0.17 kilowatt hours. So that would equate to 170 watt hours over the course of a 6-hour period in extreme heat, while maintaining a pretty low set point temperature for the freezer side and a reasonable set point temperature for the refrigerator side. So to put that in perspective for you, that was 170 watt hours. These optional batteries are 172 watt hours. So if you were going to be running this in this kind of heat, and this is pretty hot, I mean, this is like a hot car in here during the middle of the day. So if you're wanting to use a refrigerator like this in fridge freezer mode, in extreme heat like this, you really are going to want to, during the day, be able to supplement the power here with solar, because the solar will be recharging the battery as the refrigerator is using it. And 100 watts of solar can give you about 400 to 500 watt hours of charge capacity over the course of a full day. And so that would be more than enough to keep this thing running and topped off during the day, and then this would get you through the night. Then of course, if you're in more moderate temperatures, say in the 70s and 80s, or maybe you're not using the freezer mode, you got it just dialed in for refrigerator on both sides, well then you're going to get much longer run times out of a battery like this than you would in the way that I just did it. So that's kind of how the solar will work with this unit. It's about 8:15 in the evening, so we're not really getting any solar right now, but I am starting with a full battery. And as I mentioned, to use the solar, you can't power the refrigerator off of solar directly. You use the solar to recharge the optional battery. So I'm actually using that one right now, and I've got that fully charged, and I've been running the fridge off AC power. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the power right now, and so we should be running off of battery power. Now I know this whole thing works with solar as long as you have decent weather, if you are running in refrigerator mode on both sides. I've done that before. I know that works. It works like a charm. But what I'm curious, something I haven't tested before, is whether I run the freezer mode at 10 degrees and the refrigerator mode over here in the larger compartment at 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll bring you in here and I'll show you what is on the inside here just so you can see. So on the freezer side, I've got about 1.5 quarts or so of water. And then on the refrigerator side, I've got that just about 3/4 full of just basic soft drinks. And that is already cooled down. All right, so let's go ahead and plug the solar in. Now the solar input capacity on this is between 12 volts up to 42 volts. And I was surprised by that. I'm surprised it's more than 18 or 20 volts, but it is up to 42 volts. So I've got a panel out there on the other end of this cable, and I'll just go take you out there real quick and show you what that looks like. All right, so I've got a 200 watt panel out here connected, and this says a volts open circuit of 31 volts. So we are well within the 42 volt maximum. So since the solar input on the refrigerator requires a DC 5521, I've got a little multi-headed connector here that has a DC 5521 on it. So I'm just going to plug that into the side. This barn is not climate controlled. It is going to get hot and humid in here tomorrow. And we're going to see how this thing does through the course of the day tomorrow and see if it's able to finish the day at basically the same condition we started it in tonight, which is a full battery at about 8:15, see if that gets us through the night to the next morning where we can begin recharging that battery again from solar. So I'll see you in the morning and we'll just kind of check on it and see how it's doing. All right, it is the next morning. It is 7:34 a.m. Almost no sun on the solar panels at this point. But what's important to know is that the fridge is still running. Now I do have the battery protection mode set to low, but we're cutting it close from what I can tell. Actually, I think we probably are getting a low voltage reading there, that F1. I have to check the manual to see what that means. Yeah, code F1 is basically saying that when you're using the batteries, it's a low voltage detection on the battery. So we're close to running into protection mode. But the sun is coming up right now, and as soon as I get sun on the solar panels, we should be recharging the battery. So what'll be interesting to see, I'm just gonna let it go and see if it even shuts off. I'll report back if it does. If when solar is restored to the battery, if the unit will power itself back on, because I think that's an important thing to know. So I'll keep my eye on it and let you know. All right, so I did it again. I fried a charge controller, and this is my fault, although I have to say it wasn't documented in the manual. So it's still my fault because I should have known. I broke the cardinal rule of solar charge controllers, and that is you always want to connect battery power to the charge controller first and then connect solar. So where I went wrong was I got a little bit impatient, and I wasn't really thinking about the fact that there's a cut out voltage and there's a cut back in voltage, which means that the battery voltage has to be charged up to a certain voltage before the compressor will kick back on. And by the way, when you see that F1 error, it's basically just going to show you that on screen so that you know that it's low battery and the compressor is no longer working. So it is not going to run as long as it's in that F1 state. But it will resume normal operation once the battery achieves its cut-in voltage set point. And so in the course of my impatience, I actually pulled the battery out while it was charging to see if I could take it out and put it back in to wake the refrigerator up and start the compressor again. So again, I wasn't thinking about the cut-in voltage. And what ended up happening was I left the solar connected while I took the battery out. And that is a no-no. And I should have known better. Pretty much all lower end solar charge controllers have that sort of requirement where you have to connect battery power first and then you connect solar, otherwise you risk damaging that charge controller. Now the more expensive units don't have that problem. They have some circuitry built in to be able to protect themselves from the voltage fluctuations of that solar, even if the battery is not connected. But we're not talking about an expensive charge controller in this refrigerator. None of them have an expensive charge controller. So while I wasn't able to complete the testing that I had hoped to test here, I did get enough information that I actually know how this is going to work out. And that is basically, if you're in a very hot environment like this barn, which is kind of like the inside of a hot car. I got to 115 degrees on the thermostat. And so if you're trying to run this in fridge freezer mode and trying to maintain that like 10 degree set point on the freezer side, it's going to struggle a little bit. It might be close. You might be able to pull it off, but it's going to struggle a little bit to maintain enough battery power throughout the night and then have enough of excess solar production to recharge that battery while running the refrigerator. Now, if you're doing this in fridge mode on both sides, I think there's no problem. That actually works. I've seen it work. It works great. But I think it is a little bit of a toss-up if you're in an extremely hot environment and you're trying to do this kind of running indefinitely with solar and battery, with the built-in battery anyway, if you're trying to do that with the freezer mode enabled. So just keep that in mind. I think if you were in more moderate temperatures, say in the low 80s or below, and you were running freezer mode, I think you could totally get away with it. But anything higher than that, it's going to be a little bit of a toss-up as to whether you can actually pull that off. So with that understanding, let's jump in and talk about the pricing on this unit, because that is actually where it is a bit of a standout. Now the list price on this is $399, which is already a reasonable price for a DC fridge that's dual zone. But Elecaenta actually gave me a discount code that I'll put down in the description below that knocks that down to about $320, which makes this a fantastic price. And that code is actually good between now and I think August 13th. And again, I'll put all that information down in the description below if you do want to go check it out, but you can get it on Amazon. And I think it's a fantastic deal. Now the battery is an additional $99. So whether that makes sense for you, it kind of depends on how you're going to use the refrigerator. But it is very handy. I can tell you it's very handy, especially if you're making trips to the store where you're going to make multiple stops. You want to keep your frozen stuff frozen. And when you shut your car off to go inside to shop, you want to make sure the refrigerator stays running. Having that battery in there is one of the use cases, one of my favorite use cases for this fridge. It's also great on like a job site. It's obviously great for camping, RVing and things like that. Now, a couple of other things I think I'll mention that I actually really like about this. I like the fact that it's got wheels and a handle in it. You can just drag it around without having to lift it up and manhandle it all the time. I also like the fact that it has a little USB port right here. I don't think I mentioned that before, but if you're running this off a battery or DC, or you're running it through the AC adapter, you can actually charge a phone using that little USB-A style port there. It's probably only like a 12 to 15 watt port, but still typically that's about all you need. And it's just a nice little extra. I also like the fact that I can reverse the doors and that I have a separate door for the freezer zone versus the refrigerator zone. Because that's, if I'm just getting into the fridge, which is what you'll probably do most often, you don't want to let all the ice cold air out of the freezer section, and having separate doors really helps with that. And then I would also say that this is extremely quiet. So sometimes these fridges, when the compressor kicks on, there's a bit of a knock. And if you're using this in a space that's fairly tight where you're sleeping, having the compressor kick on and off might be disturbing. With this fridge, I would say that it's not disturbing at all. I'm a very light sleeper and I would be very sensitive to that. And the compressor kicking on with this fridge is almost not even noticeable. It's so quiet. So very quiet operation, and that's something I also very much appreciate. And then it also does have a Bluetooth app, and I'll put that on screen here for you. But it's got all the basic controls. It's nothing fancy, but it allows you to turn the compressor on and off, or turn the refrigerator on and off. It allows you to adjust the temperature remotely, and it also allows you to switch between eco and max modes, and also set your low, medium, high battery protection modes. And frankly, it's a little easier to do through the mobile app than it is through the interface. It's obviously not hard. You saw how I did it here, but using the mobile app, it's just that much easier. All right, I think that just about wraps it up. If you do have any lingering questions, leave those in the comments section below, and I promise to try to answer those for you. And if you did find the video helpful or useful in any way, please consider clicking that like button for me. I'd very much appreciate that. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time with me today, and I hope you'll come back and join me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.